Hi, everyone. My name's Ellen Petraits. I'm a research and instruction librarian and coordinator of graduate library instruction at Rhode Island School of Design, Fleet Library. So today I'll be talking about creating an index to our graduate thesis collection, which is overseen by the library. Rhode Island School of Design is an independent school of art and design. Our enrollment is around 2,400 students. 1,800 undergrads with roughly 500 or so grad students enrolled in programs across 18 departments. The programs range in length from 1 to 3 years, with about 200 or 300 grad students graduating each year. This translates into 200 to 300 theses to catalog and index per year. Our largest departments are the 3 architectures: landscape, interior architecture and adaptive reuse, and architecture proper. The next largest department is industrial design. Our smallest programs are ceramics and glass. Here's what the index looks like. It's created using SpringShare's LibGuide platform. The homepage is arranged by department and includes thesis location information. It's useful for it to be in the SpringShare format because I can link to other guides related to supporting graduate students. Theses are housed in one of 3 different physical locations and hosted online through Digital Commons, our institutional repository. Here's a photo of our graduate thesis reading area. It's a publicly browsable library use only collection and is open during first floor hours, 7 days a week, including evenings and weekends. The most recent theses in print form are shelved here to allow browsing and close study. Thesis writing classes often use the space to look at examples. The special format and fragile theses are housed in RISD archives, located on the 2nd floor of the library. They're available by advanced appointment, Monday through Friday, during the day in the Special Collections Archives reading room. The oldest and most durable theses are shelved in our basement storage. In storage, you can see the evolution of thesis forms and binding options through the decades. These teaching, learning, and art and design volumes with the Class A library binding are from the 1990s and the early 2000s. The Joseph Cornell light box on the right is from a graphic design student from 1992. Looking at the catalog record, notice the detailed description in the notes field and compare it to the actual thesis object. Since the cover has been sealed, the viewer must peer through the plexiglass to admire its contents and ponder its meaning. A little about the history of the index. It started with a faculty request in 2011. At this time, second copies of theses were held in many of the departmental offices. It was an interior architecture faculty member who made the request to find a way to organize theses so that students could explore and discover connections between them, past and present, and across departments. Once the interior architecture index was completed and started to be used, a request from industrial design faculty followed. So at this point, I checked with my supervisor and decided to index all the theses, all departments, as a summer project. Some of the purposes of the index: it's a bridge between the catalog records and our digital common records. It's browsable public index that can be used without a librarian or staff assistance. It's a generative tool for students to investigate possible thesis topics across departments. It's a generative tool to expand vocabulary and to consider new concepts. It's a reference tool to guide students to past theses. It's a memory aid for finding theses based on partial descriptions and impressions. It's a teaching tool to introduce students to the thesis literature specific to RISD. It allows multiple points of entry into the thesis collection, and it brings together multiple formats over time: print, digital, past and present, archives, and in storage. Here's a graphic depicting the annual thesis cycle. So you can see around graduation time, the students can upload their own thesis in Digital Commons and/or turn in a bound or physical copy into the library. My colleague in cataloging then begins the process of creating a unique catalog record and call number for each thesis. And it includes the local note RISD thesis in the 590 field. He refers to the graduate thesis subject indexes to determine popular and relevant subject headings, as well as adding new ones, thus reinforcing the use of the index. Then it's passed on to me, research and instruction, where I begin the indexing. The indexing is based on keyword, phrase, and subject searches in our online catalog. Once we've done the indexing, we're ready for the new academic year and able to present the index to our incoming graduate student population. Here's a look at the Digital Commons record from the staff side. As I mentioned, students upload the files themselves and have the ability to add keywords and select from a list of subject categories. And here's the public view. Notice that the subject categories connect individual thesis to a wider Digital Commons network. There are several other advantages of the digital version. It allows a wider online exposure and remote access. Thesis can be downloaded, it saves physical space, and the digital copy allows a preview to viewing the analog thesis if there is one. But Digital Commons, the interface is limited and not very inviting to use. There is no detailed index to browse for those seeking more information. Your only browsing options are by date and department where titles are visible. But Digital Commons does not reference our print thesis and so represents only a portion of the collection. The user is required to come up with keywords to put in the search box, hoping to find interesting and relevant results. This is the major difference between searching and browsing, between making decisions about search terms and executing a search, and browsing an already existing alphabetical list of words used in describing content that you're interested in. Using the language of Bloom's revised taxonomy, browsing would be described as part of the cognitive process of remembering and recognizing, whereas choosing search terms involves the cognitive processes of providing and applying, of formulating language, providing a word or phrase, and applying it to a search interface. This is an important distinction, like the difference between browsing the stacks and searching an online database. When students are engaged in exploratory research, which happens during the early stages of topic development, they may not possess an extensive vocabulary to formulate effective searches. Browsing the index, students can engage with the language of past theses in their department more immediately by recognizing a word or phrase that interests them and following the link to the search results. The link a librarian has carefully worked out and created beforehand. In class, I see the students' expressions open up when I show them how the index works and ask for direction from them on which words to click on. They may not understand the work behind the search, but they respond immediately when we look at the list of results. The index helps turn early discussions about thesis writing, which many people hold some anxiety about, into a generative and low-stakes exploration of thesis topics from their near peers, the students that have come before them. I think it gives the new students some perspective and appreciation for the work created in their department. And it also indicates the importance the school and the library places on presenting, preserving, and representing graduate work. So let's go through the steps. First, we create the catalog record. As seen in the life cycle slide, the cataloger creates unique record and call number and adds the 590 field RISD thesis, which forms the basis of our thesis keyword search. In the process of cataloging, my colleague Mark refers to the thesis subject index to determine subject headings, brainstorming in the cataloging process, and checking the authorities. So more than one purpose. This is what I would call an internal use of the index. Predating the digital, we have been cataloging graduate theses for many years. We have physical theses dating back to the 1960s. We do still maintain a separate online catalog in addition to using a discovery layer. The next step is to index. Depending on the department, I create at least 2 entry points, subject and year student name. For the architectures, I use 5 index categories. I index the building name if it's known. This is useful if students are looking at a building that's been addressed previously in an earlier thesis. They can find references to architectural drawings, site plans, elevations, etc., and use the bibliography as a starting point for reading. Next, I index by the typology of the structure or space. I've learned so much about each discipline as I do the indexing. For example, I learned that an alley can be considered a type of architectural space. Next is the subject index. I'm always amazed and impressed at the range of subjects covered within each department. And I like that the alphabetical treatment creates a kind of equal presentation of the topics. Let's follow the link for sea level rise. Here's how the search works. It's a keyword search using the phrase RISD thesis, along with the department code, which in this case is INTAR, and the search phrase in quotes. When I'm constructing the search, I look at the results to make sure I'm not picking up random or unwanted results. The searches are not perfect, but they are effective the majority of the time. If I need to be more specific, I can do an advanced keyword and subject search to get rid of unwanted records in the results list. It's more of an art than a science. This is definitely a handmade tool. Having said that, I do include vocabulary that is not strictly Library of Congress subject headings, such as using the familiar phrase sea level rise in the index when I'm actually searching the subject heading, Library of Congress subject heading sea level. So you can also search across departments, and in the index, I always indicate how to do this with hypertext links. It's basically a subtractive process. So once you find and execute a search that you're interested within the department, you remove the department code and repeat the search across all departments and thesis. So in INTAR, we had a six results. Taking out that department code, we have 38 results across all the thesis having to do with sea level rise. So here's what we're searching in red. Here's a subject index and catalog record example from one of our newer grad programs, Global Arts and Culture, which we abbreviate as GAC. It has a relatively short list of subjects because only 12 students have gone through the program. So I've dotted the subjects for this thesis as they appear in the index. This thesis, Palms and Propellers, is featured in multiple ways. If you follow the link to view exhibition online in the catalog record, it takes you to RISD's digital exhibition platform, which is hosted by the RISD Museum. Here, the thesis exhibitions are archived and viewable after the exhibition closes. Here's the thesis work as a digital text, and again featured in the most recent graduate thesis gallery exhibition. In this case, I really appreciate the strong visual components of the topic and adept combination of images, visual mapping, text, and graphic design. Here's another view of the graphics from the online graduate exhibition platform. Now let's switch gears a bit and look at statistics and a survey. Using SpringShare, you can gather usage statistics. So here are the numbers for our index homepage for the past 26 months. Note the peaks in usage. Here are usage statistics for the Industrial Design Index, again, one of our larger departments. The graphs show the peaks and dips in usage that follow the rhythm of the academic year. Predictably high in September when the index is introduced to incoming students, and another peak period between January and through March, which is an intensive thesis writing period leading up to graduation. These next few slides are the unpublished results from a survey my colleague Mark Calhoun conducted last fall as part of his sabbatical project. Mark is technical services librarian and since 2014 is responsible for the original cataloging and processing of the RISD theses. He surveyed his cataloging counterparts in 32 art and design school libraries and received a 50% response rate. For those schools who did not respond, he visited their website and tried to ascertain answers to his survey questions. Those he collected on a separate spreadsheet, they are not reflected in these results. The goal of the study was to determine the state of graduate theses in art and design school libraries and to establish best practices for the care and handling of the thesis. So his first question is, when doing original cataloging, what subject schema are you using? The next question, do you ever receive non-traditional thesis, as in artist books, objects, sound files, etc.? And you can see that we are not alone in receiving unique non-traditional forms. The next question, if applicable, how are physical theses made accessible to users? These results suggest that theses across access is treated in different ways, much like we're doing at RISD. And then finally, does your library actively collect physical only, digital only, or digital and physical thesis? 68% are working in a hybrid situation like we are. In these last few slides, I want to highlight the beautiful thesis exhibitions that are mounted every 2 to 3 years in our graduate student gallery by writer and senior critic Ann West. Ann has taught at RISD since 1996, where she has worked closely with countless graduate students as they develop their voice and vision through the thesis process. I've had the privilege of teaching in Ann's classes for many years, and I always welcome the students she recommends to seek me out for individual research appointments. She has published some of her writing prompts in a book I highly recommend entitled Mapping the Intelligence of Artistic Work, an exploratory guide to making, thinking, and writing. Over the years, she has curated 6 thesis exhibitions starting in 2010. Her most recent exhibition, entitled Interior Atlas, Ways of Research, opened in September 2023 and featured the thesis work of 9 students who were recommended by faculty from their respective departments. I will close with slides featuring inspiring work from the exhibition and read from Ann's introduction. In the process of writing a thesis, the worlds of visual thinking and making live in tandem. Connections emerge and are understood together through slowly evolving paths of dedicated research, speculative, experiential, experimental, formal, analytical, and critical. Research has no parameters for artists and designers. They continue to define them. The effort of this exhibition is to make the practice of inquiry visible by featuring the thoughtscapes of 9 RISD graduate thesis writers, 2021 to 2023. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I just want to say I thought this was great. We do thesis in ours, both digital and print. So looking at that aspect of cataloging was really something that I was interested in, and seeing how you guys did it.
Very good.
You're getting some great comments in the chat. This is something I hadn't really even thought about because all of our stuff is so traditional. Really great product. Link all the artifacts together across time. Thank you for sharing your work. I like the browsability of it. I like. That's a good question. How long do your exhibitions stay up? And have you had any that were kind of stumpers?
What was the last part of that? Word
Any kind that were stumpers.
numbers.
I'm not sure what stumpers means.
I mean that you were nearly stumped when you tried to figure out how are we going to do this one?
Ah,
Oh, you mean the indexing or archiving the object?
Well, actually both. I know it's kind of rare, but once in a while you do come across something where you go, "Ooh, did not expect that."
Yeah, we're definitely receive the thesis as they're given to us, and we make space. I mean, our space is kind of at a premium at this point, and that's why we have thesis in our storage basement space, which is not ideal. And I do think of that large kind of Cornell box that I showed at the beginning. When I go down to retrieve a thesis, I see that one because it takes up about half a shelf. But we honor it and keep it here. So I hope that we continue to do that. And in terms of, you know, the unique formats just keep coming, like the paper body that folds up into a box, with the second to the last example is just exquisite to see in person. And that would be held in special collections. But it was very thoughtfully, you know, folded into a box for the presentation, for the storage of it. So we haven't had any stumpers. And the exhibitions usually stay up about 6 weeks. The thesis exhibitions that were curated, the ones I closed my presentation with. And then we have a graduate exhibition, which is actually the graduate work, you know, the studio work that's right before graduation. So that's in May.
what was the title of the Ann West book?
Yeah, thank you. Mapping the Intelligence of Artistic Work, an explorative guide to making, thinking, and writing. And it was published, I think, in 2011 by Moth Press, which is out of the Maine College of Art. It's an amazing book. It has writing prompts from the classes that she's taught, and they're so creative. They're really help you kind of open up if you don't feel like writing is your strong suite. They really are fun, and they kind of make you write. You forget you're writing.
Are there any thesis materials the library cannot collect because the students want to sell the objects?
They're required as part of their graduation process to turn in a thesis. So they have to turn in one. They're always welcome to make more additions, you know, if it is something like an artist book. But they hold the intellectual rights for their thesis, and so if they wanted to sell it, you mean as an object, like an art object? Is that what you're referring to in that question?
Yes, exactly. That's what I was wondering about. If there was ever an artistic artifact, a creation itself, where they had an offer to purchase it as art.
I'm sure that happens. And so we only require the one copy. So like I said, if they wanted to turn in, if they wanted to make multiples, or you know, they're only required to turn in the text of the thesis. And so if something, you know, if they didn't want to turn in the artifact, that's always their choice.
Thank you. And Elizabeth Klein shared for Stumpers you can learn from and a website for anyone that's interested.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Sorry, my baby is crying in the background. I got sick little kids, so I didn't want all y'all to hear that. Elizabeth Klein has shared for Stumpers you can learn from and a link in the chat for anyone that needs
Oh.
it.
That's wonderful.
Yep. And we got 2 more minutes if anybody else has any questions.
Can the public view these? Are they allowed in?
No, we're not open to the public. You have to have a research need, and then you can make a research appointment. Otherwise, yeah, we're not open to the public.